that. And welcome everyone. Today we are just about to finish chapter 2. I think we have one small section to go. So I will share my screen and we can then discuss. Okay, we are on chapter 2, the meaning of the last judgment. One of the ways in which you can correct the magic miracle confusion is to remember that you did not create yourself. You are apt to forget this when you become egocentric, and this puts you in a position where a belief in magic is virtually inevitable. Your will to create was given you by your creator, who is expressing the same will in his creation. Since creative ability rests in the mind, everything you create is necessarily a matter of will. It also follows that whatever you alone make is real in your own sight, though not in the mind of God. This basic distinction leads directly into the real meaning of the Last Judgment. The Last Judgment is one of the most threatening ideas in your thinking. This is because you do not understand it. Judgment is not an attribute of God. It was brought into being only after the separation, when it became one of the many learning devices to be built into the overall plan. Just as the separation occurred over millions of years, the Last Judgment will extend over a similarly long period, and perhaps an even longer one. Its length can, however, be greatly shortened by miracles, the device for shortening, but not abolishing time. If a sufficient number become truly miracle-minded, this shortening process can be virtually immeasurable. It is essential, however, that you free yourself from fear quickly, because you must emerge from the conflict if you are to bring peace to other minds. The Last Judgment is generally thought of as a procedure undertaken by God. Actually, it will be undertaken by my brothers with my help. It is a final healing rather than a meting out of punishment, however much you may think that punishment is deserved. Punishment is a concept totally opposed to right-mindedness. And the aim of the Last Judgment is to restore right-mindedness to you. The Last Judgment might be called a process of right evaluation. It simply means that everyone will finally come to understand what is worthy and what is not. After this, the ability to choose can be directed rationally. Until this distinction is made, however, the vacillations between free and imprisoned will cannot but continue. The first step toward freedom involves a sorting out of the false from the true. This is a process of separation in the constructive sense and reflects the true meaning of the apocalypse. Everyone will ultimately look upon his own creations and choose to preserve only what is good, just as God himself looked upon what he had created and knew that it was good. At this point, the mind can begin to look with love on its own creations because of their worthiness. At the same time, the mind will inevitably disown its miscreations, which, without belief, will no longer exist. The term Last Judgment is frightening not only because it has been projected onto God, but also because of the association of last with death. This is an outstanding example of upside-down perception. If the meaning of the Last Judgment is objectively examined, it is quite apparent that it is really the doorway to life. No one who lives in fear is really alive. Your own last judgment cannot be directed toward yourself because you are not your own creation. You can, however, apply it meaningfully and at any time to everything you have made, and retain in your memory only what is creative and good. This is what your right-mindedness cannot but dictate. The purpose of time is solely to give you time to achieve this judgment. It is your own perfect judgment of your own perfect creations. When everything you retain is lovable, there is no reason to fear to remain with you. No reason for fear to remain with you. This is your part in the at-one-ment. Okay. Welcome, Freddie. Welcome, Rebecca. We just finished reading the last part of chapter 2, section 8, the meaning of the last judgment.
Hi, Terry.
Hi.
Yeah, even before the last sentence there, I was thinking about the atonement and thinking this sounds quite a bit like the atonement. You know,
Right.
I think there's strong connections between what this is saying about the last judgment, giving up all false ideas and becoming one with right-mindedness. Sounds very much like atonement to me.
Agree.
Hmm.
It certainly does. It's interesting. I feel since I've gone through A Course in Miracles so many times, since 1992, actually since 1992, I've been reading it. I feel like there's more of a meting out every time I read it, and still deciding what is worthy of my mind to retain and what can I just let go of, because it was created as a misperception out of fear, right? And just going through the process over and over again, it's almost like, I used to say, it's like when you've before you cook rice and you've got to rinse it, right, to clear it off and clean it. And every time you sift it, it gets cleaner and cleaner and cleaner, almost like a lens you're polishing. And every time you polish it, you can see it clearer, more clearly. You can see through it more clearly. Your vision gets a little more clear.
But it never gets completely clear, does it, that rice? It's like no matter how many times you do it, it's always a little bit of cloudiness left in it.
Right.
The line that just jumps out at us is just as the separation occurred over millions of years, the last judgment will extend over a similarly long period and perhaps an even longer one. And we read this recently and we're like, really? This is going to take millions of years? I mean, we've recently been like in the last few years, we think we shared this before, that we've been feeling closer and closer to the time when Jesus was alive. Like 2,000 years when we were a child felt might as well have been eternity. It was like back in the, the distant past. And now 2,000 years is very short period of time. But when we see this, and also just as the separation occurred over millions of years, that surprises us. We feel as if the separation was kind of an instantaneous thing. The mind of the child of God had this crazy mad idea and suddenly the world was created. And yet this seems to, maybe we don't need to focus in on those words too much and try to understand them, because we don't actually have the capacity to understand them right now. But and then, so we were thinking about this recently, and then we thought, well, actually, if you look at all the people, if you imagine just all the people in the world having to come to a place that we haven't even managed to get to yet, this place of perfect understanding of our perfect sinlessness. Then we think, okay, millions of years, it still seems a bit much.
We have a similar problem with that. Not to interrupt, but go ahead, continue.
No, we're glad you interrupted because we were running out of things to say.
All right. Well, that issue struck us as well. But the other part of it, that the part of that sentence that troubled us the most was the ending. Just as the separation occurred over millions of years, the last judgment will extend over a similarly long period, and perhaps even a longer one. One would think you would know, that the author of this would know, that it's not a perhaps to the author, in which case we found it curious that they said perhaps.
Yeah.
Like
And
they
also,
didn't know something.
What is longer than millions of years? Billions
So
of years?
yeah, as a matter of fact, I just did a Google search, and the Earth is 4.543 billion years old.
Apparently,
so apparently the Earth is part of our projection, right? So that could be part of the millions. And it's so interesting because I've shared this with some of you. I had a dream once, and this being, whatever it was, seemed like a human being, but didn't really have a particular face, but it didn't seem to be faceless either. It was asking me, what do you want to do next? Because they say we've chosen this, right? These are our choices. What do you want to do next? No, it was, what do you want to be? And I said, you mean who do I want to be? He said, no, what do you want to be? I said, well, I can be anything. I can be the earth. And this being said, yeah, you can be the earth, but it takes many souls to be the earth. So you would be working together, kind of like a mini version of the one mind, but joined with other minds to be the earth. And I thought, that's really cool. Like, maybe I want to be that. I wasn't sure. I didn't give an answer yet because I wanted to think about it. Like, do I want to be the earth? And what would that feel like to be the earth? But then I remember waking up from that dream and never looking at the earth the same again, because indigenous tribes always said Mother Earth, right? The earth had a soul. And I could read that and I could think that, okay, well, maybe that's true. But after this dream, I was like, oh my gosh, that is true. Like, the earth is an entity, just like we are an entity, right? And I thought, how interesting is that? And now, like, when I walk on the earth, I think, this is a being. This isn't just a thing, right? And it's many beings. So I have a new reverence for the earth since that. And I just found it interesting, right? So maybe millions really is billions. And I don't know, like, when the separation started, did it start with the galaxies and the planets? Is that what they're talking about? The start of the separation? Or was it even before that? Even before the visual, being able to visually have anything concrete other than just thought?
Because when you think about it, if the Big Bang started everything, it's the fragmentation. So that how much further back was that? And is that the start of the separation when everything fragmented?
Well, the universe is still expanding, and so one could
Right.
argue that the separation is still occurring, right? But,
yes.
And when it starts to recede because it reached its full, then it would be. But again, the part that Joe, and there's another line in this as well, in 2:8. It is essential, however, that you free yourself from fear quickly. Again, this idea of like time being in short supply. You must do this quickly. Yeah, time's an illusion, but hurry up. It just seems a little bit weird, along with the one before that, again, it might take even longer. It just seems like the author's relationship with time has changed from the earlier chapter already. It's the way that they're talking about it anyway seems to have changed, but to us.
Yeah. Interesting point.
I think time only exists for people that believe in time.
Indeed.
If you stop actually believing in time, you don't have to you don't have to be worried about the future. You don't have to be feeling guilty about the past, because all we have is now. And that's what this whole thing is trying to lead to, the now. being now, being in the now, eternally in the now. All this mind stuff is all, it's what the mind does to take us out of that peace. And you mentioned what you, over the years, Terry, what you've been learning to let go of and give up. Well, I'm kind of, I quite like the idea of letting go of my mind. And I know things are going to come up in the mind, but most of it is dross. I know that the mind's very useful. You can use it to plan. But a lot of the recurring, don't they say that you have 60,000 thoughts a day, and most of them are recycled? Anxieties, fears, a lot of it's, to use not very good word, but a lot of it's garbage, it's a waste of energy. But, I just like the idea of being free of the mind, just being in a state of being and not so affected by it.
Right.
Yeah.
Good point. I love that. I'm guessing that you've read Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now.
Yeah, long time ago. Yeah.
Great book on getting to that place of now. Yeah,
but
really.
We're talking about time. I think time is, it's a mental construct, isn't it? It's a creation that we've made, time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%.
It's very useful, I know, but we don't have to really be dominated by it the way we think about our lives in a linear fashion, because our life really is being present.
How long is an instant?
Mm-hmm.
All the best things happen outside of time. It's another way of putting it.
It's true. Yeah. Okay, any more conversation about this, or should we go to chapter 3?
Yeah, the only thing that I had a bit of a hang up on with that last, I don't really like it when we give God human attributes. Okay, and what made me think that was, everyone will ultimately look upon his own creations and choose to preserve only what is good. Fair enough, I understand that, because we are in this bodily experience as men and women, just as God himself looked upon what he had created and knew that it was good. That's kind of like giving God kind of human characteristics to me.
Yeah, why would he even judge it as good?
Pardon?
Yeah, because in my mind, the first thing I think is, why would God judge it as good? He would just create it and just be that, and that would be it. He wouldn't judge it and say, "Oh, this is good."
I can see that's a useful feedback for somebody who wants to believe in God as something separate.
Right. Right.
What he's created and believes it's good. And we know that it's good if it's of God, because God is good. God is the ultimate good. But I just don't get it when God is spoken about in human terms. That's just a little...
Grab my glossary for a second. Yes, that is a good point. And that brings me back to, and I know we'll probably read about this in the clarification of terms, but it's always a good reminder to read about what God is according to the Course in Miracles. So, according to the glossary, God is the first person in the Trinity, the creator, the source of all being or life, the Father, whose fatherhood is established by the existence of his Son, Christ, the first cause, whose Son is his effect. God's essence is spirit, which is shared with all creation, whose unity is the state of heaven. And that's interesting because we want to think the source of all being or life, but we think of life as in terms of the body. But in truth, life is eternal. So if life is eternal, it can't be of the body.
I find it more helpful to think of life in terms of light.
Right, right. God's essence is spirit.
Energy, yeah.
It's shared with all creation. It's interesting you say that too, because I was doing my yoga practice the other day. And typically when I do my yoga practice, I see light, right, surrounding things. I get these light episodes. And I see light surrounding my hands when I'm in like the down dog. I see it surrounding my feet when I'm in the waterfall pose. I see it surrounding the trees when I'm looking out my window. And I think, well, that's the truth of what everything is, the light that we can perceive, whether it's with through our eyes or through true vision or whatever it is. That's the essence, right, of what we are is light, which is awesome. Yeah. And I was just talking to someone about that book, Hands of Light by Barbara Brennan. I've got it out on my sofa right now, which is a fantastic book too. So anyways, not to get off topic. Any other discussions, or shall we continue? Okay, let's keep going. All right, we are on chapter 3, the innocent perception, at one mint without sacrifice. A further point must be perfectly clear before any residual fear still associated with miracles can disappear. The crucifixion did not establish the at-one-ment. The resurrection did. Many sincere Christians have misunderstood this. No one who is free of the belief in scarcity could possibly make this mistake. If the crucifixion is seen from an upside-down point of view, it does appear as if God permitted and even encouraged one of his sons to suffer because he was good. This particularly unfortunate interpretation, which arose out of projection, has led many people to be bitterly afraid of God. Such anti-religious concepts enter into many religions. Yet the real Christian should pause and ask, how could this be? Is it likely that God himself would be capable of the kind of thinking which his own words have clearly stated is unworthy of his Son? The best defense, as always, is not to attack another's position, but rather to protect the truth. It is unwise to accept any concept if you have to invert a whole frame of reference in order to justify it. This procedure is painful in its minor applications and genuinely tragic on a wider scale. Persecution frequently results in an attempt to justify the terrible misperception that God himself persecuted his own Son on behalf of salvation. The very words are meaningless. It has been particularly difficult to overcome this because although the error itself is no harder to correct than any other, many have been unwilling to give it up in view of its prominent value as a defense. In milder forms, a parent says, "This hurts me more than it hurts you," and feels exonerated in beating a child. Can you believe our Father really thinks this way? It is so essential that all such thinking be dispelled that we must be sure that nothing of this kind remains in your mind. I was not punished because you were bad. The holy, benign lesson the at-one-ment teaches is lost if it is tainted with this kind of distortion in any form. The statement, "Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord," is a misperception by which one assigns his own evil past to God. The evil past has nothing to do with God. He did not create it, and he does not maintain it. God does not believe in retribution. His mind does not create that way. He does not hold your evil deeds against you. It is likely that he would hold them. Is it likely that he would hold them against me? Be very sure that you recognize how utterly impossible this assumption is, and how entirely it arises from projection. This kind of error is responsible for a host of related errors, including the belief that God rejected Adam and forced him out of the Garden of Eden. It is also why you may believe from time to time that I am misdirecting you. I have made every effort to use words that are almost impossible to distort, but it is always possible to twist symbols around if you wish. Sacrifice is a notion totally unknown to God. It arises solely from fear, and frightened people can be vicious. Sacrificing in any way is a violation of my injunction that you should be merciful, even as your Father in heaven is merciful. It has been hard for many Christians to realize that this applies to themselves. Good teachers never terrorize their students. To terrorize is to attack, and this results in rejection of what the teacher offers. The result is learning failure. I have been correctly referred to as the Lamb of God who taketh away the sins of the world. But those who represent the Lamb as blood-stained do not understand the meaning of the symbol. Correctly understood, it is a very simple symbol that speaks of my innocence. The lion and the lamb lying down together symbolize that strength and innocence are not in conflict, but naturally live in peace. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God, is another way of saying the same thing. A pure mind knows the truth, and this is its strength. It does not confuse destruction with innocence, because it associates innocence with strength, not with weakness. Innocence is incapable of sacrificing anything because the innocent mind has everything and strives only to protect its wholeness. It cannot project. It can only honor other minds, because honor is the natural greeting of the truly loved to others who are like them. The Lamb taketh away the sins of the world in the sense that the state of innocence or grace is one in which the meaning of the at-one-ment is perfectly apparent. The at-one-ment is entirely unambiguous. It is perfectly clear because it exists in light. Only the attempts to shroud it in darkness have made it inaccessible to those who do not choose to see. The at-one-ment itself radiates nothing but truth. It therefore epitomizes harmlessness and sheds only blessing. It could not do this if it arose from anything but perfect innocence. Innocence is wisdom because it is unaware of evil, and evil does not exist. It is, however, perfectly aware of everything that is true. The resurrection demonstrated that nothing can destroy truth. Good can withstand any form of evil, as light abolishes forms of darkness. The at-one-ment is therefore the perfect lesson. It is the final demonstration that all the other lessons I taught are true. If you can accept this one generalization now, there will be no need to learn from many smaller lessons. You are released from all errors if you believe this. The innocence of God is the true state of mind of his Son. In this state, your mind knows God, for God is not symbolic, he is fact. Knowing his Son as he is, you realize that the at-one-ment, not sacrifice, is the only appropriate gift for God's altar, where nothing except perfection belongs. The understanding of the innocent is truth. That is why their altars are truly radiant. Any thoughts or conversations about anything we just read?
I've got a couple of things. 2, 1, the best defense, as always, is not to attack another's position, but rather to protect the truth. We knew that concept. We'd forgotten where in the text it came in. We feel that is just such a beautiful piece of like practical advice for living. In so many situations, it's like, it's sort of one of the lessons that's there for us really at the moment all the time, is like how we can insist on being ourselves and insist on being who we really are to the best of our ability without telling anybody else that they're wrong, or because there's that other bit, isn't it, where it says like, the ego loves to point out the faults of other egos. If you find yourself criticizing anybody else, then you're seeing through. If you're telling somebody else that they're seeing through the ego, then you must be seeing through the ego, because the Holy Spirit or whatever doesn't see error at all. And so we're glad to have had our attention drawn to that line. And then the rest of that paragraph, after we began a relationship with God began to have an awareness of the fact that there was a relationship we have, or however you want to put it, we got into a very abusive relationship, as we've shared before, and we found ourselves in a lot of pain over and over. And it would have been very easy to feel as if, and we could see how our own behavior was putting us in positions where we were placing us in positions where we were getting hurt, so we could see how we were doing things, and in whatever way we were being not perfect, and so we were being hurt, and we were very tempted to feel as if God was punishing us, as if we were being, you did that wrong, so here you go, here's some pain. But we would say now, we're not sure, we haven't given this a lot of thought, but we would say now that it was much more the case that we were seeing the consequences of our own wrong-minded thinking. We were seeing the consequences of believing the ego. We were, seeing what happens when we live in fear. And it was necessary for us to go through that in order that we decided to choose a different way. But it wasn't that God was punishing us for doing it wrong. It was just that if everything had worked out the way our ego wanted it to, then we wouldn't have actually reached inside for the real treasures that are there, or something like that anyway.
Well, what you just described is the art of self-flagellation. And some of us stay there for a really long time. It's true. Sometimes I don't know. It's kind of like a necessary part of the process. At least it was for for me, where you get to the point where you're like, there's got to be a different way to look at this. So that really resonated with me.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm just curious. So were either of you raised in a particular type of religion where you would think that you were being punished by a God that would be vengeful or judgmental?
No, I mean, the other thing that really struck us reading this chapter is that we never felt that God was judgmental. And like even as we're saying, we felt like we were being punished. It's like that was an idea. It certainly wasn't a truth for us. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We did go to a Church of England school when we were little, but we always felt like we knew better than the people who were trying to teach us about the Bible and about Jesus. We always felt we knew better than them. It's like, no, we know that doesn't make sense, you know. But we were brought up with a literal father who was extremely punishing. So we guess that's where if what we're saying is something that like resonates with people who've had traumatic pasts and not necessarily like nice childhoods, then that's probably where that comes from. You know, we were very abused as a child.
Yeah, that makes sense for that to be part of that. Mm-hmm.
We were going to talk about 2:1 as well, or ask about it anyway. The best defense, as always, is not to attack another's position, but rather to protect the truth. And we're wondering if anybody would be willing to go ahead and give an example of how that is done, for instance, with someone, you know, at least in your view, right, how that would be done. For instance, with someone saying, oh, for instance, oh, you're a trans woman, therefore you're a groomer and trying to sexually assault children. Yeah, we don't want to go ahead and attack their position, but we do want to defend truth. How is that done in that practical aspect, would you suggest? Anyone?
I don't have that particular experience, but I have an experience where I felt attacked. And I know I've shared this before, where I was in a relationship where the person would just come at me again and again and again, verbally abusive. And to the point where in this relationship, I would have a drink just to deal with him when he would come home from work. I'd start on his mother's advice, just take your coffee cup and put wine in it at 3:00. And then when he comes home, then it won't bother you. Right. So I was like, okay, I'll try that. I mean, I knew my mother was an alcoholic and I didn't want to go down that path, but I'm thinking, well, maybe there's a reason why she was drinking, right? Maybe it will help. So I would take my coffee cup, put a little wine in it. He'd come home. And of course that didn't help at all because it just made me again more engaging. And when he would come at me, I just like flare up and my temper would be equally matching his. And I would defend my innocence, right, against his horrible accusations, which weren't true. And one day, when he was going through one of his tirades, I mentioned this, I lit a candle and I just stopped. I stopped listening to what he was saying. And I just gazed into the light and I just let go of everything. To Freddie's point earlier, I just be here now. That's all I wanted to do. I just did not want to be in that headspace. I just wanted to focus on the light and the oneness and be here now. And then in that moment, I had this stream of consciousness that just started speaking through me. And exactly what needed to be said came out of my mouth. And I don't know where it came from. I think it just came from that one mind of God. I mean, yes, I know where it came from. Didn't come from this mind. It came from my connection to the one mind of God. Had nothing to do with what he was saying at all. But it was exactly the right thing to say at the moment, right? And isn't the Course says, right? I will tell you exactly what to say, when to say it, and to whom. And it has nothing to do with what they're saying. So I guess my best explanation to your point, when someone is coming at you and judging you or being harsh because their opinion of you is none of your business, right? And the reason why their opinion of you is none of your business is because it has nothing to do with you. It has to do with them, it has to do with their early conditioning, their fears, their ego mind, which is being projected at you at that moment, right? So what's the best thing to say to them? Absolutely nothing with regard to what they're saying, because everything they're saying is a lie. So how do you find that truth, that moment of truth, to connect or not connect, just to connect with your source of one mind, right? That at one minute for you at the moment is just to kind of let go and let God. And it's not easy to do in the heat of the moment, right?
Well, we don't feel a lot of heat in that moment. We feel a lot of confusion. For instance, if someone's saying it on in a public space, right?
Right.
Whether or not they are attacking us personally, the information is still incorrect. No, we're under no illusions that we're going to change their mind with anything brilliant that comes out of our mouth. But there are other people reading this misinformation as well. And for them, right, we want to go ahead and say something to preserve the truth.
Right.
And you know, so there it is. It isn't really heated for us. It's just like, you know, we can see the person is just totally wrapped up in fear. I mean, they're just so buried by it. There's no shot of getting well, apparently there is a miraculous shot of doing it, but yeah, our ego isn't going to come up with that for sure. So, you know,
right.
But again, like we say, it's not about heat. It's just about trying to preserve the truth for the people who don't know and who are reading this and then believing it. And, you know, because they're getting misinformation, right? So,
right.
Anyway, your point was taken. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question. And, you know, for me personally, I always try, when that moment happens, because I'm involved in discussions where people bring up topics of all kinds of things. And I'm a big I'm a big ally of LGBTQ plus, because I've had, my brother, you know, I've had my own personal experience of being around someone that I love dearly that was not treated well by others. And now when I'm in a room full of people and a comment is made or a joke is made, I correct it immediately. And that's just how I do it. I mean, I just, you know, as a matter of fact, would you like to learn more about this? I'm happy to share, you know, and maybe because for whatever reason, you know, I am able to connect with that person or not. I think there's a lot of different ways that miracles are happening with with misinformation and right information, and just the understanding of the at one minute, the understanding that this is all an illusion. And, you know, and it's interesting that you brought that up too, Angel, because as I was reading this, I'm thinking, God really is a they, them. Like, we should change this whole book instead of he, because that bothers me too. And it should be they, them through the whole book. And I was imagining that as I was reading this, and I'm like, gosh, it would just make so much more sense.
We change it in our head.
Right?
We do.
Yeah, exactly. But again, words are but symbols of symbols. And, you know, this whole separation thing is all part of the illusion. So, you know, it's just an interesting, interesting field. And I love the conversation. And if anybody else has anything they'd like to share with regard to that, feel free.
Yeah, I think that what you just said about the truth is that we're all one. I think that's the truth that's referred to in that line, that sentence. The best defense, as always, is not to attack another's position, but rather to protect the truth. The truth is that we are one. No matter what is showing up, we are one. and I can be in the awareness of that, regardless of what's happening outside.
Yes.
I'm not explaining this very well, but another thing that did occur to me was things sometimes come into my awareness, and I do have a degree of accountability, personal accountability. Now, what is this coming into my awareness for? You know, on some level, because I'm not a victim, you know, and we are one. They say this about your partner. Your partner always tells you the truth, you know, even if it's something you don't want to hear. And it's something that you need to be accountable for if you're going to join with your partner. Now, we're all partners to one another. And, you know, I think it's always good to not see yourself as a victim, but to accept some accountability in, you know, what is coming into view. That's my personal truth when it comes to, you know, things that I invite into my awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great.
Now, you know, I didn't get the feeling that had, Angel, when you spoke about that scenario, I didn't feel that it's something that happened to you actually personally, on a personal level, but was more of a something that is happening within the awareness of the trans world and the distorted awareness. You know, you mentioned the misinformation about it, about grooming children, all that. And I kind of wondered if it was a general concern rather than a personal one.
Both.
It was both, right? Okay.
Right. When it's personal, it's easy to just say, okay, there are no words that we're going to have that's going to help this person. We can just, you know, when one's words are no better than silence, we are capable of staying silent.
Right.
But yeah, it's more when it is in a group and there are people who do not have an opinion yet, or not a strong opinion, that are being influenced by this. And it feels like, to preserve the truth, something should be said, because truth still has an opportunity to be salvaged there in that scenario, right? Or possibly. So it's that one that we would feel more inclined to say something, not a personal one, but a more public one, you know, just again, in order to go ahead and really it's not personal at all. It's more of being an ally, regardless of where we fall on that, right? It's the ally part for everyone else. That's where it's coming from.
Sure.
It's just, you know, when we take a position as an ally and also being trans, you know, they tend to hear it as it's us trying to protect ourselves, or we're in opposition to them personally, right? And instead of the idea.
Right.
Whereas somebody that's not part of the community, except as an ally, you know, sometimes there's less things to attack them for, you know.
Well, it's interesting. I was just thinking of another situation that happened kind of recently in our neighborhood, where I was at a neighborhood party, and of course, being in Florida now, I have a lot of opportunity to be an ally. So I was at a party, and we were talking. I was meeting a new neighbor, and oh, why did you come to Florida? And I said, oh, you know, weather and taxes, and he said, yeah. That for me too, but also for freedom. And he said, you know, I just I want to make sure my boys can be boys and no one's trying to make them into girls. And I said, well, I said, you and I differ from our political and our belief in that statement. And, you know, I don't feel that is actually true. And, you know, and he said, well, how could you say that? Blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, like I said, you know, we have a difference of opinion. And he said, well, I'll make sure that when my boys come to your house, they're wearing dresses. And I said, well, you can do that if that feels right for you. I said, but just know that I still see you as perfect and whole in every way, but I think we're done with this conversation. And I walked away.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that you can say much more than that, right? I mean, like, you can't change people's minds. You can just kind of say, okay, I know that the Christ in you, the Christ in me honors the Christ in you, and whatever I'm talking to right now is not the Christ in you. And I think I'm done with this conversation.
That's it, isn't it, Terry? That every ego in the world is capable of these horrific thoughts and feelings and hatred and fear, and it's not about like my ego is better than your ego.
Right.
That just leads to that awful let's fight this out. And it's actually by dropping our own ego, or stopping listening to our own ego, that we're able to simply, peacefully, without any fear. Yeah, it's fear, isn't it? Fear that gives these conversations that energy. We remember like being in these spiritual groups on Facebook years ago and getting into these really fierce arguments with people. We would be frightened of getting up in the morning to see what, like, because we wrote some stuff last night, and I mean, it's all very loving and spiritual, but it wasn't, because it was all ego driven.
More opportunities to learn and grow and just be love, right? Every day, every thought. Okay,
you must have felt kind of some, well, certainly sadness, and you must have felt sorry for the guy in a way, because he's coming from a place of fear, isn't he?
Yeah, I don't know that I felt sorry for him. I think there was just a recognition that I wasn't able to connect with the Christ in him, and that was my point. That was what I would have preferred, but I also wasn't interested in talking to his ego.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like, okay, I'm no longer interested in this conversation, but I wish you well. You know, just kind of left it at that.
Interesting story.
Yeah. Yeah, there's all kinds of interesting things that happen here in Florida. So anyway, shall we try to read a little bit more? I think we've got 8 more minutes. We might have time to squeeze another reading in. Let's see. It's true, Ernesto. All right. Miracles as true perceptions. I have stated that the basic concepts referred to in this course are not matters of degree. Certain fundamental concepts cannot be understood in terms of opposites. It is impossible to conceive of light and darkness, or everything and nothing, as joint possibilities. They are all true or all false. It is essential that you realize your thinking will be erratic until a firm commitment to one or the other is made. A firm commitment to darkness or nothingness, however, is impossible. No one has ever lived who has not experienced some light and something. No one, therefore, is able to deny truth totally, even if he thinks he can. Innocence is not a partial attribute. It is not real until it is total. The partly innocent are apt to be quite foolish at times. It is not until their innocence becomes a viewpoint with universal application that it becomes wisdom. Innocent or true perception means that You never misperceive and always see truly. More simply, it means that you never see what does not exist and always see what does. When you lack confidence in what someone will do, you're attesting to your belief that he is not in his right mind. This is hardly a miracle-based frame of reference. It also has the disastrous effect of denying the power of the miracle. The miracle perceives everything as it is. If nothing but the truth exists, right-minded seeing cannot see anything but perfection. I have said that only what God creates, or what you create with the same will, has any real existence. This, then, is all the innocent can see. They do not suffer from distorted perception. You are afraid of God's will because you have used your own mind, which he created in the likeness of his own, to miscreate. The mind can miscreate only when it believes it is not free. An imprisoned mind is not free because it is possessed or held back by itself. It is therefore limited, and the will is not free to assert itself. To be one is to be of one mind or will. When the will of the sonship and the Father are one, their perfect accord is heaven. Nothing can prevail against a Son of God who commends his spirit into the hands of his Father. By doing this, the mind awakens from its sleep and remembers its Creator. All sense of separation disappears. The Son of God is part of the Holy Trinity, but the Trinity itself is one. There is no confusion within its levels, because they are of one mind and one will. This single purpose creates perfect integration and establishes the peace of God. Yet this vision can be perceived only by the truly innocent, because their hearts are pure. The innocent defend true perception instead of defending themselves against it. Understanding the lesson of the at-one-ment, they are without the wish to attack, and therefore they see truly. This is what the Bible means when it says, when he shall appear or be perceived, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. The way to correct distortions is to withdraw your faith in them and invest it only in what is true. You cannot make untruth true. If you are willing to accept what is true in everything you perceive, you let it be true for you. Truth overcomes all error, and those who live in error and emptiness can never find lasting solace. If you perceive truly, you are canceling out misperceptions in yourself and in others simultaneously. Because you see them as they are, you offer them your acceptance of their truth so they can accept it for themselves. This is the healing that the miracle induces. Well, there's your answer, Angel. I think we just got it. Wow.
Hmm.
Simple, but not always easy, right?
Yeah, indeed.
Yes.
That covers a lot of territory. Simple, but not easy.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yes. Boy, that was very powerful. Very powerful. Any last minute concepts or discussions or questions or anything based on what we just read?
Well, I was just thinking that was a tall order, that last chapter, to have that kind of perception when we believe we're here in the body.
Right.
Because it's really all to do with spiritual vision, isn't it?
Yes.
Mm.
That's what it's all about.
Indeed.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a minute, haven't we? We've shared before about when we met our 3-year-old through like a journey visualization technique. Our 3-year-old, we met her. She was in the visualization. She was walking along by the side of the river and she saw a dragonfly and she was transfixed by the beauty of it. And we felt her innocence and her unconditional love. And afterwards we cried for hours, big hot tears pouring out of our eyes at the loss of innocence, having felt it again to be her. And knowing that we live today with this constant low level, perhaps, or maybe it isn't so low level, feeling of guilt. So we're really looking forward to this atonement business and getting back to that guiltless innocence. Yeah.
The lessons are powerful, powerful tools. Powerful tools. I feel like what we just read kind of sums up the introduction to A Course in Miracles. Nothing real can be threatened and nothing unreal exists. Okay, any other thoughts or comments before we close? And don't forget, I won't be here next week. Sorry, guys. I am in Los Angeles with my daughter and granddaughter. But then I'll be back for a few more weeks and then off to Costa Rica for 10 days.
Careful of the mudslides.
In Los Angeles, I know.
They just had an earthquake this morning too.
Oh, they had one yesterday too.
5 point something. It might have been yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah, you know.
That was great, Terry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Great conversation today. Yes, thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, have a great week and see you in a couple weeks.
Bye-bye.
Safe travels.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a great trip, Terry.
Thank you, Pam. Thank
Enjoy.
you. Bye.